Okay, thanks for joining us for this for another fireside here. Today I have my colleague Kumsal with us. Kumsal and I worked together for a number of years and stayed in touch, and since then we've gone all kinds of different ways in our career path. Because I think that was like 2010, so it's a while ago, 10 years ago.
2011, and then
2011.
12 we I think last time we saw each other, and then bumped into each other on the subway, and then just
Right.
kept in touch.
I forgot.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah,
Well, you're still looking good, and thank you for joining us today.
thank you. Glad to be here.
So, why don't you just start by giving us a little bit of a, I mean, I know you as a developer and a programmer. You also have some design skills under your belt, but
Yeah.
you know, how do you sort of define yourself these days?
These days, only recently, 2 months ago, I started my video game company. But for more than 15 years, I've done web development. It first started off as a sort of living in Turkey back then. We kind of had to be jack of all trades. So do design work, do a bit of development, but then everything about the internet was new. Like you had to write JavaScript for 2 different browsers, and those things eventually got more standardized, and then jQuery came along, that sort of thing. So the roles and the titles start to become more or less established. So then in that sense, like I could say, well, okay, a bit of web designer, a bit of web developer, and I guess these days it's coming full cycle, and now they want to call people who are knowledgeable in many areas full stack developers. So,
Right.
but I wonder if it's actually kind of, well, let's just milk the cow. And I mean, I don't want to start off with a heated debate here, but it's as
Is that a
if,
Turkish expression?
yeah. So, I mean, I heard similar stories from people who recently moved to Canada that in their country situation was more or less the same. That in certain countries where there's, let's say, economic uncertainty, you have to be skilled in many areas. Whereas in, let's say, Western countries, um, our perception back then when I was living in Turkey, that people in the Western world were more specialized, that you actually had to employ one person doing one job properly. Whereas in Turkey, a lot of people were trying to everything all together. So that was the main difference. So I guess that's why maybe when you and I were working together, there was a bit of like, maybe you weren't sure what I was really doing, and that might be quite accurate. Because I do remember our former boss, he had a hard time when he was hiring me, like why he should hire me, because I do this, but I do that, but can I do both equally well, that sort of thing. Like
Yeah.
this could be your strength if you use it, if you manage to sell it well. Of course, if you don't know, if you can't do any one of these well enough, then no one is going to hire you. But there is no wrong way about trying to do many things as well as focusing on one thing, which I later realized later in my career. So, um, um,
That's
but
great.
only
I mean,
recent. Sorry?
I was just going to say we really the program a big sort of point of the program or an underlying tenet of the program is that we're trying to foster the development of T-shaped individuals, right? People who
Yeah,
haven't had a
yeah,
linear career path, and how that's actually can be
yeah,
very valuable actually.
yeah, yeah. Because when you, I want to use the word young in the sense that you are new to the industry, not age-wise, because I
Right.
see a lot of people in their 40s, 50s trying to enter the web development industry.
Mhm.
But say when you are fresh, uh, fresh starter, it's often not clear which path you must follow. and because everything is new, it's like learning a new language. You are so busy learning let's say the building blocks of it, just the syntax, the words, the vocabulary. You're not really focusing on the pronunciation, learning new idioms, how to use the word in the right context to sound funny or to understand the jokes. Those concepts come later. Nevertheless, you should still pay attention. Like I guess that T shape describes it well. Like you have to go deep, but you also have to go wide too. Like broaden your horizon and try to take as much knowledge as possible, and one day it will pay off. But losing focus is also easy too. Always keep in mind to evaluate what you are learning and why it might be useful, and whether what you are doing right now is the right way to go about your longer term goal. And it's difficult to define those goals sometimes, but just be aware of what you are doing, because sometimes you may keep yourself busy, and there's this sense of like, okay, I'm busy, I'm doing something, but is it effective enough or productive enough? So you got to keep that balance too.
That's fair. Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about the work you're doing today?
Today, I'm working on my new game. I'm hoping to release it by Halloween, so I guess that I only have 2 weeks. So because I have a lot of coding experience, and I have a great passion in games, so I thought I could transfer my knowledge into video game area.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I'm working on these days. I have been reading a lot about video games, how to make them. So I've had a lot of theoretical knowledge, but only recently by starting my company, I'm now trying to turn it into a more practical profession.
All right. Yeah, we're all about learning by doing here too. So
Cool.
right.
Yeah,
So
it's part of it.
What have you found? Like, what past career roles have you had that you feel are helping you do this work now? What's come in really handy, and where did you pick it up? The stuff that you aren't learning as you're doing, I guess.
So a few things come to my mind. My first web development or design job was very repetitive. I would basically copy HTML pages and swap text, because this was like maybe 2012.
Okay.
And ASP or PHP was known, but not very widely used. So everything was still very static in that sense. So I remember doing a lot of repetitive work, but then I thought, well, I can either keep doing this, or I can actually sit down and spend 15 minutes writing a small tool for myself and then speed up the process. I think that kind of mindset really worked out for me, because even this, like today, I mean, not exactly today, but these days, it's more apparent to me that what I realized back then is still part of me, that when I see myself doing something in a repetitive way, it's like, well, you have machines for this. Why should you be doing this? Like what? Like just write some kind of system code or whatever and trigger and just let it do its job. The danger, though, of course, is you sometimes may get caught up in developing that tool, that you may be spending unnecessary amount of time fine-tuning it. But if you keep that urge under control, sometimes some of those tools, if you expose them to the public, they actually turn out to be great products. And I think some of the widely used products that people enjoy these days happen to be just side projects or some kind of tool that a developer wrote for himself, then I believe Discord came out like that. So an internal chat application tool is now very popular.
Sure.
And so I think this is something that entrepreneurs or people with entrepreneur mindset could actually think about. Like, always focus on what kind of like what can you do to make either your life or someone else's life easier.
Yeah.
Because there's the other side of like the entrepreneurship. Like, what must I do to become rich? Well, maybe fix a problem first, then money will be a byproduct of that operation. So, because at the end of the day, if you want to make money, there are a lot easier, maybe shadier ways of making money. So, but if you're in this because you enjoy writing code, you like fixing problems, and you especially enjoy fixing other people's problems, and they actually thank you by paying you, well, I'd say that's a better solution, yeah.
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 We're all about that.
Yeah.
Here, I hope everyone's listening to what Kumsal is saying, and I did not give him answers, but he's hitting all of the values that we're all about here: entrepreneurialism and growth mindset, and and problem solving, and learning by problem solving, and providing value by solving other people's problems. That's absolutely what we're all about. So that's great. Like, you've completed a lot of projects at this point, probably too many to count.
Yeah.
You know, which can you tell us about a couple that you were really proud of?
Well, up until 2 months ago, I was still employed actually in that place that you and I worked together.
Okay.
There isn't really, the content of our job was a bit difficult to display even back then, and now it's kind of we were in the adult dating industry, so it would not be too appropriate to show the content. So, but I can actually show a few examples of my work back then, like maybe even I was in Turkey or like fresh in Canada 13 years ago. So I'm going to share my screen, and I guess you might just be seeing the chat, but
no, we can see it.
Okay, cool. So this is not, of course, all linear, but might also shed some light how things sort of progressed in terms of like technology choices. This design was done for an e-commerce company in Turkey. So it doesn't look your typical e-commerce site, but the technology choice back then was using VB.NET or C#.NET and some JavaScript elements. But it's your typical e-commerce site, except it has a fancier look. Unfortunately, this never took off, but I'm really proud of this project. Like, we actually got it to a point, but it didn't go live. Soon after this, I actually moved to Canada, and I was getting freelance clients. This is something I did for a psychotherapist.
Okay.
She spoke both Turkish and Arabic, coincidentally. So she actually wanted to have two, like both languages.
Right.
And so I am going to go back and forth between two views here. So this is the Arabic homepage. So as you can see, the concern here is that the text is running from right to left.
Yeah. Yep.
And now it's easy to run the text in this view from right to left. Let's say this bigger area could actually have the text run from right to left. But then to a Western audience, we like to see the menus on the left side of the screen. So for us to see a menu on the left side and reading the text running from left to right is the natural inclination, but for an Arabic reader, you got to have the menu on the right side because this is how they start. So, but then how do you keep the design simple enough and yet you swap things around? Like this was done in 2010, and I don't think responsiveness or what is that other word that uh,
Reactive, mobile
the
friendly.
breakpoints and immediate quiz, all that
Yeah,
stuff was not known or actually supported.
sure.
But providing the client this kind of choice, I believe this is the kind of thing that is very important because
Mm-hmm.
the client doesn't necessarily come forward and say, well, in this version, it has to be laid out like this. That's kind of up to you. And if you know that, kind of thing, that maybe you are, say, culturally more aware,
Yeah.
then you create a difference for your client. So um, I will actually ask anyone who's providing solutions to put themselves in the client's shoes sometimes. Like your job is partially making your freelance client or your boss happy. But at the end of the day, your ultimate job is to make the users of that product or service be happy. Because
Yeah.
if the end users are happy, your freelance client or boss will be happy, you'll have less trouble. So um, there's a fine line here. Like, are you going to please the boss, get the job done, or should you just go the extra mile and then maybe focus on the user experience here? So,
Right.
um,
And is that just because, what do you think? Is that just because, bosses don't necessarily have the same level of, they don't have the more granular level of insight as to why those things are important, why those user-centric decisions are important, or?
I think my observation is that, I mean, this is this kind of thing we get to hear a lot these days, that human beings are under constant bombardment of information. There's just so much out there, like it's distracting us. I believe it's the same thing for bosses too. I found that I like to think of different fields and like practices why um, different people in different professions do things in a certain way, because sometimes it's so easy to get kind of distracted in your own like world, that okay, this is all web development, fine, but then like I ask myself this question: well, how are hospitals organized? How is the triage unit organized? Well, why is there 5, 6, or 7 people in a, like, say, Navy SEAL team? Anything like that. Like these are maybe stupid questions, but it always boils down to managing the work and managing the people. I found from my own experience that when you go above 5, 6 people in your team, there's so much overhead because people come and ask you for advice, and something breaks down or something doesn't work. Like something always comes to your attention. So during the day, you have only so many hours and so many energy, like so much energy, that when I believe the short answer is bosses are just too overwhelmed if the team size is big, or if the team size is small enough, but then there is no efficient way of solving their problems. So sometimes they are too busy, like pushing things around. They may actually not see what um, the real customer actually would like. This is one possibility, because I don't want to count like incompetence. I'm sure they are trying their best, but I'm
Right.
guessing there must be something else that is real enough and yet not easily perceived.
I
So
think sometimes, especially people in who are working in an oversight capacity as a director or manager or director or whatever, right?
yeah,
They have to manage so many people in an organization of scale. Anyway, they have to manage so many people of so many different specializations. It's a lot harder for them to stay on top of how those those best practices in those different specializations are changing and evolving, right? They need to be able to rely on those people to.
Yes, and I guess it's also partly because when you try to solve today's problems with yesterday's knowledge and conventions, sometimes that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So because it's so comforting to apply the same solution, and it's often too easy to lose sight that, well, it didn't work, well, let's try harder, but maybe it's
Yeah.
not the right solution. So bosses have that kind of problem, but also, like, I guess it's also, I will say, employees have an equal amount of responsibility to bring it up to their bosses and say, well, sir, yeah, like, I know you've been trying your best, but it's as if we are trying to solve this problem with our current knowledge. Things may have changed.
Right.
Well, if he's the right kind of boss, you will just alert him or her, and well, as a team, you'll move forward. Well, if he's not
Right.
the right kind of guy, well, you're in the wrong team anyway. So
Yeah.
either way, it's going to pay off for you. So I mean, you'll come to some kind of realization that, okay, either moving forward or moving away, I guess. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So with regard to this site that you just showed us, there are a lot of people in the program who come to us from an international background.
Yeah.
A lot of people who haven't been in Canada very long.
Sure.
And a lot of people of every background right now who are struggling to find work. But in this whole this isn't a planned question either, but you got me thinking. This whole opportunity with needing sites in double languages.
Yeah.
First of all, do you think that, like, there is like an opportunity for sort of newly landed people to do this kind of work in their communities?
Definitely. Well, some of the first freelance clients I got were from my own community.
Okay.
And
how did you connect with that community here, though?
back then, Yahoo Groups was a thing. So this is like, I moved here in 2008. So sometime in 2009, I was already in touch with a bunch of Turkish businesses here. And because, I mean, these stores were all like brick and mortar stores. Nowadays, that's dying too. But so these stores had already been open here for at least a decade. I mean, some of these guys had regular clients, Canadian clients, and over time, as you like come and go, you get to know Canadian clients. So that's kind of your transition into, like, okay, I have helped my community. Well, it's mutually beneficial. It's not like you are using them, but they also introduce you to a newer audience, because at the end of the day, how much more business can you get from your own community? Because it's always a smaller pool. But always volunteer, that, like, sometimes do pro bono jobs. And so, I mean, that's how it worked out for me initially. And then now it's become Upwork, but back then it was Elance.
Right.
I got a lot of clients from different countries. That was lucrative but challenging because of the time zone, which is interesting because now that is becoming more of a common thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting how things turn around and, like, come in a different perspective, maybe.
Yeah.
So, but the language thing is going to be more and more important.
I think so too. And, like, okay, so you've acknowledged that this is an older site, but what advice would you give to maybe some of our participants if that opportunity comes along where it does need to be a multi-language website? How would you approach that problem today?
Well, I think this problem is no longer relevant, but it might still be. The encoding, like how the text is displayed on web pages, this used to be an issue, that you had to write some kind of character set description in the meta tags of the HTML code. Nowadays, like you just say, okay, this is UTF, and the browsers are basically taking care of the character set. However, when this was done efficiently 10 years ago, custom fonts were not a thing. Now, when you introduce custom fonts, that's all cool. Like we can actually download or on the fly, basically just say, okay, Google, give me this font or that font. We could even actually change it on the fly. That's fine, but keep this in mind. A font file is basically a big array of each glyph, like each item in the array is basically representing a character. What you see as a fancy looking character A or B is basically part of that font file. Well, I actually come across this quite regularly when I do my video game projects. I actually look at a font, it looks so cool, but the font doesn't come with a number set in it. So I can type all the characters, but there's no number support. It's just blank.
Yeah,
So
I've seen that too.
yeah, so the problem with the language is, sure, you did the encoding fine, but the font file, well, does it have that glyph in that for that language?
Right.
So if it doesn't, then you fall back to a different kind of font that supports. So basically, what we know is I mean, Arial is probably universal, but what Roboto may not be universal in a, like a, say, a dialect in India or maybe some part of South Asia.
Okay.
They probably have their own go-to fonts that we don't even know anything about. So again, culturally, being aware of like the different cultures and what they do, and that kind of information, or I mean lack thereof, shouldn't scare you, because that's also equally easy to find these days. You could always go on forums, or like there are I mean, this was a big thing. I remember, like was it about.com or ask.com, like a website that you could go ask any question and then someone will answer. Now we have many versions of it. We have Quora and other like platforms. You could be asking questions like this: what is the most commonly used font in, well, fill in the country name or some like region, and I'm sure someone will answer you. And all these little pieces of information will be important. But like I said, should you start collecting all this right now because one day you might need it? Well, that might be a waste of time, and you may not always know what you need. But have this kind of mindset that, well, okay, how can I get this information quickly? Basically, I'll summarize it like, I want to learn this, but I should figure out a system so that I can actually learn that easily. Like figure out the system to learn instead of like learning everything all the time. Like that, you could be doing that too, but there's no end to it. There's no, it's just going to take an insane amount of time.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about jobs, because a lot of people here are trying to get jobs, and they're at the beginning of their careers, and they don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
And they're going to have all kinds of different jobs, and they're going to have all kinds of different. They're going to work for all kinds of different people in their careers. So, first of all, it's like, tell me about sort of what was the best job you ever had, and what was it, and in terms of like how it prepared you or what you learned from either from the work or from the people you were working with or the people you were working for. What sort of really positively had a profound impact on you?
Okay. I guess I could switch to webcam instead of showing screen. Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me stop showing screen. Okay, good. So I'd say in terms of like, I guess I'll rephrase your question if you don't mind.
No, that's fine.
What project I worked on gave me the most satisfaction, or sort of
Sure.
Yeah, this answer is, it's going to be a bit of like kind of maybe money related answer, but
Okay.
but I think money is really not the main issue here. I got this freelance client from Manitoba, and so basically when Flash was a thing back then, and Flash had this part that you could basically use and deploy it as a desktop application.
Yeah.
It was Adobe Air. Not that many people were doing that back then. And I got this client from Manitoba, so they asked for a very little application that actually, when you closed it, it kind of docked itself in the taskbar or in Mac, so in the bottom part. So it was basically tracking their stock symbol. Also, it let you type a few stock symbols so they could maybe look at a sort of comparative view. So this was actually a small enough application, and I think the agreed on price was $1,200 or $1,300. And I did it in a reasonably quick time, and I was always in touch with a person in that company. So she always brought their meeting notes. I was always in touch with her. But when the payment day came, she said thank you, and money will be transferred, all good. Then she said that her boss wanted to talk to me. Okay, so I'm just summarizing the conversation. Basically, he wanted to give me $2,000, and during the conversation that he also mentioned that they would actually like to get more work done by me. And I started to answer right away. Okay, well, I will basically take the 1,300 out of 2,000, and whatever work I'll do extra, the 700 will be advanced, like just in it, like he's actually paying up in advance. He said, no, you misunderstood me. That's your tip.
Ha!
And
All right.
so we'll talk the next job, maybe like the following week, whatever. But here's your tip. So for me, getting a tip basically half the amount of the project, then you feel okay, like I think I really did something good here, because here's the boss like coming on the phone, and he's just like thanking me personally and giving a huge amount of tip. Um, so it isn't about the money, but you really feel like you made a difference for them. I
Yeah.
think that's very important.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that is important too. That's cool that they,
yeah,
recognized as well. That's
yeah,
great. And that's a great way to, too many people are focused on the quick money or the immediate job, right? And not really like nurturing that client relationship and
yeah,
making it a thing that can grow and can continue to serve both parties, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a fine line between using someone or a resource and utilizing it. So um, you have to be focusing on long-term healthy relationships than taking what you need right now and then maybe hoping that that resource will be available to you tomorrow. Um, and I think this is a good segue to basically, often developers ask questions about how they can improve their technical skill set and such, but all the good things that I can remember in my career, people saying nice words about my work, either like just saying a thank you or giving extra money, all those things basically they all come down to having soft skills, and that's very important. You don't often realize it, but you have to uh, build a good rapport with people, and
Yeah.
and and of course you shouldn't do that in a scummy way, like I mentioned. It's like, well, I have to
Right.
be building a good rapport, so because that's how I succeed. Well, you got the wrong message. So
Right. Be
you should
genuine.
be genuine,
Yeah.
yeah, helping people, and that you should have that kind of, like, I don't know, satisfaction. This is good enough, like that you must feel that you are doing the right thing, and one day it will pay off.
Right.
Um, so
That's great. We're all about soft skills development here too. And I don't
Yeah.
know if you saw in your education. I had a very similar conversation with my friend Chris on another fireside here, but and he brought it up, and he's a developer, and he said the most important courses that I took in college were
Yeah.
communications.
Yeah.
He said the
Yeah.
most important ones were communications, and they were the ones that a lot of the developers thought were kind of beneath them. And a lot of those people were good developers, but
Yeah.
they skipped those courses, and I wouldn't necessarily want them on a team, or I wouldn't want to necessarily put them in front of a client either. To I
Yes.
feel like they cheated themselves out of some really valuable learning.
Yeah, I think so. Because let's say, like, as a personal example, I remember was the second year in university. So early, like at the beginning of the academic year, we were given a topic. Like we were divided into groups of 3 or 4, and each group was given a topic that they would have to prepare and give a long presentation, an hour-long presentation, 7-8 months later, and write a paper about this. This is like I guess the second year in university. Normally you do this kind of thing in your last year. But I quickly realized I was still very shy back then, and I realized that I would have anxiety presenting anything in front of my classmates.
Okay.
Then instead of focusing on, like, my friends were trying to work out the physics, this was like Fourier transform, some like really high level mathematics and all that stuff. And I thought, you know what, either they will learn it and teach it to me, or I will actually just spend a few extra hours and then learn this. But if I have no way of presenting my end, I don't want to let like my friends down. So I sat down and read a few books about like how to present properly, how to do, like, how to have a proper body language and whatever, that kind of thing. And I realized that was what I was missing, and I tried to fill that gap. So, and this is kind of what I was referring to, maybe like early on in the conversation. Sometimes when you're busy doing something, but it's easy to lose the vision and why you are doing what you are doing. Always take a step back, take breaks, and just reevaluate what you are doing. Is it going to be enough to meet the target? Is the delivery method good enough to, like, your product might be good, but if you wrap it in a shitty package, or it's just the delivery is not coming along, then it's not going to work. It's going to frustrate you, because then you are going to feel, well, I work so hard and no one is understanding me, how valuable I am and no one is seeing me. Well, that feeling sucks.
It does.
No one is going to blame you that you didn't work hard or you don't know enough, but maybe there was something else missing that you could have done. And we group all those things under soft skills, under communications, as you said, your friend mentioned. Yeah, that's really important.
That ties right into marketing and promotion and stuff too. I mean, if you could have built the greatest app that does whatever in the world, if you can't convey the value of that thing, it doesn't matter. None of that work matters.
No, it doesn't, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, sometimes you just it's those small things you have to take care of. But because here's the thing, I mean, when I was showing the screen and that work example using both languages, I was going to mention, actually, that was done with jQuery, and that was talking to PHP script and pulling the data from MySQL. Because that was very cool back then, doing it that way. There weren't that many examples like single page applications, because everything was just, pages were just reloading. Nowadays, you have different technologies. You have React, Vue, other things. Now we've gone all serverless, like PHP kind of doesn't matter. It's all API. You just hit an endpoint, pull data. All those things change, but one thing hasn't changed. It's how you communicate with similar clients and how you get their project done. Because just fill in the blanks. It's React today, Vue tomorrow. It doesn't matter. You'll always learn a new thing. But if you don't know how to speak to people, trust me, no one is going to speak to you, even if you know everything in the industry, technical, wise.
Yeah, that's very true. Is there anything, thinking back to sort of the beginning of your career, is there anything that in hindsight you wish you'd done differently?
This is well, I was comparing, like, say, jack of all trades, master of none, maybe that kind of thing. I mean, I don't know how it would have paid off, but I wish I hadn't focused on some things that, because in retrospect, I focused on some things that maybe didn't really work out, but then that's the hindsight, you don't know. But I think I know one thing, what I was doing, it was sort of trying to please everybody. Like, learn this thing, learn another thing, but then it's like, well, I'll learn this new thing to get this project done, but then you are never focusing on one thing. Like, what I'm saying is, learn still as much as you can, but instead of learning 5 things, if you're aiming for 15 things, maybe that's just too many. I think that's what I was doing.
Okay.
So
I think probably a lot of people go through that too.
yes, and I think to remedy that, what I would suggest is, I mean, back then our problem was this, because when I started, this was early 2000s. I mean, in some topics, there were only a handful of books in like whole Amazon website. Like, video training was not a thing. I mean, YouTube wasn't around. Like, these days, you just sit down and it's self-taught. You could actually train yourself watching YouTube videos.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing wasn't possible.
No.
So what I would do differently now, for my advice would be to someone who is actually going to try all those things and still lose perspective because it's easy, then ask someone. These days, it's really easy to find people.
Yeah.
That's how we can actually reduce that number from 15 to 5.
Okay.
And,
is this like mentorship that you're talking about?
Or it could be mentorship kind of implicates that it's going to be a longer term relationship.
Right.
This could be as simple as, well, say you generally love programming. Well, there's so much to programming. You could be programming the space rocket, so like Elon Musk does. I mean, I'm sure he hasn't actually written the code, but he had the vision, and some smart programmer sat down and wrote the code. So his rocket boosters are just landing, on their feet. Well, there's a great amount of calculation there. It's the wind speed, the Earth's rotation, and that's programming too. So if you have a genuine interest in programming and solving real-world problems, there's so much more to it than just doing web development. So keep that perspective too. Like, maybe ask broader questions, then kind of check that against your interests and what you would like to do, instead of, oh, web development is so hot these days, there are a lot of boot camps, there's this, there's that. Well, sure, there's nothing wrong with that, but maybe there's a different path that we might take, which will make you happier, I don't know, much more productive. That, in that sense, don't commit yourself to one thing too early. Just ask general questions, then seek the mentorship a little bit further down the line.
Okay. I just had a question come in that is kind of on topic, so I won't save this one till the end. Are there any particular technical skills that you wish you had learned earlier, or that you think are very relevant and that devs today should be on top of?
Technical skills, yes. We talked about soft skills, but tech skills, I think, test-driven development. I'm still, after 15 years, I'm still guilty of like not doing it either properly or regularly. I think there's something so difficult. Let's say there's something so tempting about just jumping into code and writing it, or just saying, I'll actually practice test-driven development here. There's something against our human nature that says if you're not doing the real work by doing test-driven development. I am happy to see that a lot more companies are taking it more seriously, and yet
sure.
when I go to conferences, like it's when it's the type of conference where it's sort of like free choice, like there are 4 rooms and attendants could actually pick any room they want during that hour. Always the room with the test-driven development topic has the most attendance, like by far, like 4 or 5 times more people. That only indicates that people actually don't do it, they want to do it, or they want to check whether they are doing it right. So that's one technical skill that I can't emphasize enough.
Okay. Let's talk, what kinds of conferences do you go to, and how easy are they to get into, and should, you know, when should people start going to conferences, if not right away?
I used to go to View conferences. I think I've been there 2 or 3 times. FITC, also there was Web Unleashed from the same group. It's now part of FITC conference series.
Okay.
So when you don't have, let's say, when you're paying out of your pocket, of course it's expensive. If your company pays, you could still go 1 or 2, maybe a year. But these days, what's actually happening is because it's all digital, lately, the ones that I used to go to, they are now becoming free, some of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, especially in the gaming industry right now. Like the last few conferences I've attended to, they were all free, 3-day long, really long hours, and it's like I wonder who's actually sponsoring, who's paying for that thing, because I mean it's still people's time, and I mean it could be done on a volunteer basis, but I'm sure there's still some cost somewhere.
For sure.
But then it also it's exposed to a lot more people who couldn't fly because of visa issues, or because of like it's even more expensive to stay in a hotel if you're flying from different country. So in that sense, like this is one of the few positive things what the current pandemic situation has brought up. Yes, it sucks to be indoor, but this feels like this is going to be the new reality. Kind of get used to meeting people online, and that's another piece of advice I can give to your audience. It was networking in a room, physically meeting people is challenging for some people, for introverts, but it's become much more challenging for extroverts too. Now, people who are normally talkative, they can walk into a room and meet people. Like say, they can see a room full of 50 people and see, oh, here's my target audience, and they will go and talk to as many people as they can. Now they don't have that luxury. So now these people have to follow online conferences, and it's much harder to conduct a conversation typing or chatting, because you'll be chatting with like one-on-one, or maybe there will be some kind of conference call, but it's not so easy to pinpoint people online. So it comes with some difficulty, but also a new way of like meeting people too, because if people write down their interests and they have online profiles, you're already filtering who you want to talk to. In the old way, when it was all physical, you're not a mind reader. You walk into a room, it takes some time to get to know what that person likes or their interests are. So this comes with positive and negative. So you could actually turn this into a much more positive thing.
That's excellent. Okay, I guess I have 2 questions left, and that's probably all the time we have. But you obviously have a lot of expertise in development and programming. Do you have any final advice for anybody just getting started? Anything beyond what you've already shared with us today? I mean, you've talked about communication skills are important, and to test-driven data or test-driven development. Is there anything else? Somebody who's like feeling like it's a really big world,
It is a big world. I will say, be curious. never lose that aspect. Like, just be curious, always ask questions, try to incorporate the knowledge you gain or you observe in different fields. I actually referred to this earlier. Try to examine how people in other fields do their job, because I will basically boil down to web development into, there's a bunch of user information, you collect that through a form and you post it into a database. That's your job. Doesn't sound fun now? So if you want to make this fun, we talk about user experience and interfaces, but all those things are kind of carrying the real work forward. It's up to you to make your job either interesting or useful or maybe practical to the end user, so that it doesn't feel like people are just filling out another form. And sometimes knowing things, I don't know, like culture sensitivities, color schemes, I don't know, font cases, like all those little things are bringing so much more than just, oh, okay, there's an API and I'm posting information. It's as if in your mind you are kind of playing a game, and that you are making it much more interesting and fun for yourself too. Because otherwise, honestly, like maybe this is me talking about after 15 years, but I mean, after 15 years, this is basically what I've learned. Well, it's just collecting information and posting to somewhere. It's still fun, mind you, but you don't have that kind of perspective. No one actually told me that before, like that it was going to be like that.
So this is something you came to on yourself, an awareness.
Exactly. And it's like it's suddenly as if like someone just pulled the curtain and yeah, you start minding the what's that expression, like you start minding the guy behind the curtain.
Right.
Oh, okay, this is all there was then. So by being curious, this is what I'm going to say. Try to read different things, magazines, especially people living in Toronto. I know this for sure. Maybe in other cities it may be applicable too. Your tax dollars, actually, this was true until 2010. Like the mayor back then, they were publishing every September some kind of bulletin that showed like how much of your tax money went to different city services. So I saw, well, okay, some of my money goes to libraries. So when I actually get some books from the libraries, it's still my tax dollars. Well, why don't I use the library more often? And turns out my library card, if I type that in O'Reilly Safari, like online books, it's free. Well,
yeah.
Linda is free. Well,
Linda's free with I love my public library here.
Yeah, it's lovely. So why don't you use your tax dollars? It's already paid for it. So go use Linda.
When we worked together, our team had an agency Linda account. Do you remember what it cost for an agency on a monthly basis?
Yeah,
it was like over $2,000, man. Just so people could do their own learning on their projects.
Yeah, I do remember, because after you left, I got my promotions, and I was the one who was dealing with the renewal, and I got aware of the cost, and I think in some service it was $10,000 a year.
Yeah.
Because like when you pay for 20 people, like each head costs a lot.
Exactly.
So about being curious, say sometimes the work that you are working on may not pay off right away, but may still be beneficial later. Follow that path too. For example, I know early 2000s an Israeli firm was working on a device that would actually send or create smell over the internet. This sounded so stupid back then. Like, why would anyone want to have a device in their house so that maybe their relatives, it's as if sending an email and suddenly in your living room you feel like the smell of roses.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or home cooking or something.
You know where that basically led them to. It's not the same company, but it's the know-how. These
Okay.
days, another Israeli company is using a similar technology to develop a very quick 30-second detection test for COVID through breath.
Wow. They're
So they
so
will just
innovative.
smell your breath, and in 30 seconds, this device will tell you whether you have it or not.
They're so innovative in that country. They do
Yeah.
crazy things. They do
So
crazy.
being curious in that sense, yes, try to read different things, expose yourself to so many things that, like, well, because there's something so comforting about doing the same thing, like eating a very similar food, watching the same kind of movies, but get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
If you feel like something you're struggling a little bit, then maybe you are doing the right thing, because then you are
Right.
learning. So
You're growing.
yeah,
Yeah.
just be cognizant of what you are doing and why you are doing. I mean, sometimes you need to take a rest and, of course, chill a bit. I get that. I'm not saying you can't always operate under this kind of like uh, working all the time or sort of being aware. You have to shut it down a bit.
Yeah.
But in your designated work hours, uh, there's something about being busy and doing some work. So, like,
Right.
I don't know if I put it in the right words, but I think I
No,
got it.
I think it was
Yeah,
brilliant actually. We just have a couple of minutes left, but I was
sure.
wondering one
Yeah.
last question. Could you speak to sort of, speak to the challenges, the career challenges, either of yesterday or today, facing newly landed immigrants such as yourself? You were that person once upon a time.
Yeah.
You were in that situation, and especially right now, trying to jumpstart a career. What's the best advice you would give?
Volunteer and don't be shy, either in using your, like improving your language skills, speaking better English, use it, practice it. It's part of what I was saying, like um, grow your experience level by doing and failing. Imagine you are playing D&D, your characters may die.
Would you
You
say
start a
D&D?
yeah, D&D, Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
Say
okay.
you start a new character. Yes, in real life, sometimes that's a lot harder, but
Yeah,
always keep in mind that uh, because you are doing one wrong thing today, you are going to be like dead tomorrow. Things are always looking a bit better than they first seem. Uh, Making a few mistakes won't, kill you. Like, I'm
right,
depending on what kind of mistake you are doing, but just try, be humble. If you fail, say, well, I now know this doesn't work. Can I do better?
right,
What can I do differently? If you fail enough times, maybe seek an expert. Um, but try, don't stay still, and don't sit still and think that, oh, I can do, like, don't let this happen all in your head. Actually do, act on it, observe, and then take the next step instead of always planning and letting this sort of simmer in your head and I can do this, I can do this. Like, uh, as much as you plan, you win the game when you go out in the field. You don't win it in your head. You kind of plan for it, but you have to go and play the game.
right. And that plan changes a lot of the time. More often, I find the
Yeah,
plan
no
changes.
matter how much you prepare, maybe the wind will be different the next day.
Right.
The field will be wet. Um, a player in your team may come down with some kind of cold. You don't know, but you can only prepare yourself as much as possible. Have that kind of
Mhm.
confidence in your skill set and just move forward, because there's really no guarantee. But if you don't act on it, it won't happen anyway.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can sign off there. I want to thank you so much personally. It's been great to reconnect with you.
Likewise.
And thank you on behalf of the Prepper Foundation for joining us. You are indeed an insightful wealth of knowledge. I remember working with you. You were always very patient and thoughtful and wise. You are a
Thank you.
wise man, Kumsal. So
Thank you, sir.
thank you for sharing the benefits of that with our program today.
Thank you
Really
so much.
appreciate it.
I really enjoyed this session, really. Thank
All
you.
right. Hopefully soon we'll have a chance to have a proper in-person meetup next time I'm in Toronto.
For sure. For sure. Thank you.
Okay. Have a
Okay.
great
Have a
afternoon,
nice
my
day.
friend.
Bye.
Bye-bye.